Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Can you imagine a Karen who needs to deal with technical issues related to computers? Me too. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Prevent us from fixing your stuff without approval? Okay. On one of my previous jobs, I worked with server maintenance. My tasks mostly consisted of monitoring servers and fixing problems before customers even noticed them, fixing problems that customers experienced, and upgrading software and hardware. One thing to note here is that none of the work I did was included in any contract or agreement with customers, meaning everything I did had to be logged and was then billed. This made the admin part of my job consume more time than I would have liked. One day I received an email from sales. Cheap customer, as the name implies, was very cheap and generally very hard to work with. They were very disliked by most of the company. Cheap customer now demanded that any billable work exceeding 30 minutes had to be approved by Karen, their tech manager. Now, the admin part of any incident could take at least 10 to 15 minutes, and basic troubleshooting an additional 15 minutes. So we're already at the limit before we can even start fixing it. Anyone with even a tiny bit of experience knows that this is a recipe for disaster, which is what I told sales. Sales in turn responded that they tried to tell Karen this, but Karen shot them down. She was adamant on not paying a penny more than she had to. Because of this attitude, their entire server environment was a mess. We had offered to clean it up and make it better and more reliable, but this would cost extra, so they refused. Fast forward a few weeks. Our monitor software picks up that one of their database servers suddenly ran out of disk space. Some troubleshooting later, I find that it had generated a massive log file for whatever reason. I try to call Karen, but she doesn't answer, so I send her an email. At the same time, one of their web servers went down. None of their websites are now working. I don't know if these two were related, but they very well could have been. Again, I try to call Karen, but no reply. So I send her another email asking for approval to continue troubleshooting and fixing the problem. By now, our service desk has been getting calls from cheap customers' users. Service desk forwards several tickets to me, but I simply reply that I'm awaiting confirmation from Karen as per her request. Service desk in turn forwards this answer to the end users, who in turn tell us Karen recently boarded a 4-hour flight. Chances are very high she's not going to read her emails until she lands. A little more than an hour later, word reaches CEO at Cheap Customer, and I'm put on the phone with him. He immediately overrules Karen's policy and grants us approval to fix everything. It was solved by rebooting some services in roughly 15 minutes. Oh, and remember the tickets I got from the service desk? Responding to those technically counts as work, so with one phone call with the CEO, half a dozen ticket responses, as well as 2 tickets of malfunctioning servers, what should have been a 90-minute job resulted in me billing almost 3 hours. I admit I exaggerated a bit. This, in addition to 3 hours that the servers were broken, meant the company lost a lot more than they would have done if they just allowed us to work normally. As for Karen, she still worked at Cheap Customer when I last heard. She made this incident into her personal vendetta and canceled the contract with us. She and the rest of the company would not be missed. And our second story. She not only lost her job, the whole store was shut down. A few years ago, I worked for my college bookstore. It was great, at first, but then Idiot started working there. Idiot was not prepared to manage the store. She hired 5 people to stock, cashier, work the floor, etc. instead of 2. She blew through her entire payroll budget in less than 6 months. Someone came from the main office to help her learn the ropes, and she learned nothing. She even had me do her daily reports that I shouldn't have been allowed to do at all, and she never learned how to do them. She was super lazy and just bad at her job. The reason she blew through her payroll budget is that she didn't want to be on the floor at all. Anyway, I asked her in March if I would be working or not, so I would have time to look for summer work, and she told me that I would be working all summer. I just moved out of my parents' house, so I really needed the money. May rolls around, and she tells me that she can't have me for a single day. I was mad and panicky, but I figured it out and moved out just fine. In August, I come back with a sprained toe. It was really visibly bad. My toe was entirely bruised. I asked her if I could work on the daily reports, which involved sitting. She said that she needed me up front on the register. I asked if I could sit on a stool as standing hurt. She said that was unprofessional and that I had to stand. Just a little note here, I didn't get sick pay at this job, but if someone called in sick, the company policy was to let them go for 1 day without questions. After that, you could start to ask what was up, maybe request a doctor's note. MC number 1. I faked a cough and said, "I'm sorry, idiot. I'm too sorry to work. I think I'm going to go home." She immediately started to backtrack and said I could sit on the stool if I needed to, but I decided it hurt too much to work. I'd thrown the real rules in her face. There was no rule against sitting at the register, and she had to let me go home. She was stuck on the floor all day. The next day I worked, I looked at the schedule, and I had no shifts beyond that. She had even taken my name off the schedule. It was frustrating and petty. I later found out that she thought I talked too much. I was a GD cashier. It's my job to talk to people. It didn't get to me for long, though, since I was already done with the BS of the job. I was back in school, so I really didn't need the money, student loans, and I was starting my thesis. I decided enough was enough. MC number 2. Toward the end of my shift, I requested a meeting with Idiot and the assistant manager, AM, who'd been telling me I should escape ASAP. AM was cool. Idiot told me that she couldn't have me working often, but that I could come in once a month to do the daily reports. Ew, no. I told Idiot that I was giving my 2 weeks' notice as I had school work to do. It was pretty clear she wanted me gone, so she wholeheartedly agreed. As I got up to leave, she started to ask me when I could teach her how to do the daily reports. I told her that I was sorry, but I was not scheduled to work the next 2 weeks. In fact, I wasn't scheduled at all. You are not allowed to change an employee's schedule after they give their 2 weeks. Her face blanched, and she realized she just screwed herself. I could report her to upper management for all the BS she was pulling, more than mentioned here. She was stuck. I walked out of there feeling free. Later, I found out from AM that the store had gone to crap without me. Apparently, Idiot wasn't really friendly, nor was she good at customer service. People used to come in the store specifically to talk to me, and then they would buy something for wasting my time. Sales went down, she started letting people go, and sales kept going down. She didn't do the daily reports for so long that someone from corporate had to come and do them for her. I found out in January, 5 months later, that the corporate office decided to close the location. She was out of a job, and they weren't looking to hire her back into the company. I don't know what happened to Idiot after that. And our last story. Revenge of a Simple Worker. I'm a teacher, and when I was younger, I would take summer jobs to supplement my income. One summer, I worked for a bricklayer named Jerry and heard an amazing story. I worked for Jerry in the mid-90s, so the story either happened in the early 90s or in the 80s. Here goes. The setting for the story was a community of small rural towns which had only one brick contractor. Jerry began his career as a bricklayer working for this contractor, a real jerk. Jerk and Jerk's son, adult working the business with his father, would harass, belittle, and humiliate all their employees on a regular basis. No work was ever good enough, and employees were told they weren't worth what they were paid. Not only did Jerk mistreat his employees, but he was equally rude to other subcontractors and to the general contractors who hired him. Since he was the only bricklayer in the community, there was nothing anyone could do about it. Needless to say, the turnover rate for the brick business was very high. The only person that stuck with Jerk and Company was Jerry. Jerry told me that his father had installed a self-confidence in him that Jerry could do anything he set his mind to, and that he should not evaluate himself according to what others said, but rather by the facts. Although Jerry was belittled by Jerk and Son, as were all other employees, Jerry was becoming a very good bricklayer. Jerry knew he was good. Jerk knew Jerry was good, but Jerk didn't know that Jerry knew he was good. Not only was Jerry a good bricklayer, he was very respectful to the boss who disrespected him. Jerk thought that Jerry was a naive pushover who was buying his head games. That would prove to be a huge mistake on his part. One day, Jerry was doing an exceptionally good job of laying brick. Not only was his craftsmanship amazing, he was laying brick at a high rate of speed so that he was making his boss lots of money. Of course, Jerk and Son were belittling his work as though he were doing the very opposite. This scenario was being observed by the general contractor of the project. After work that day, the general contractor asked Jerry to stay behind so he could talk to him, as did every other construction worker in the community. General contractor hated working with Jerk. General contractor told Jerry he had heard Jerk and Son belittling him and told him that he disagreed with everything Jerk was saying. He asked Jerry if he ever considered going into business for himself, and Jerry said that he would like to do that someday. General contractor then said he would loan Jerry the money to buy a mixer, the most expensive piece of equipment needed to start a brick business, if Jerry would indeed start said business. The only hitch was that Jerry would need to pay for the mixer whenever he could, and that he would subcontract under general contractor. Jerry agreed to those terms and prepared to begin his new venture. Jerry respectfully told Jerk and Son his plans and gave his notice. The two mocked Jerry ruthlessly and laughed him to scorn. Jerk told Jerry, "You'll be back in 2 months begging to return to your job. You'll never make it as a subcontractor." 2 months later, rather than collapsing as Jerk predicted, Jerry was still in business and going strong. 1 year later, Jerry's business was booming, and a drunk Jerk showed up at Jerry's house and begged him to come back to work with Jerk and Son. "Jerry, you're the best employee I ever had." Jerry replied, "Why didn't you ever tell me that when I was working for you?" Jerk couldn't answer the question, and Jerry obviously didn't accept the offer for employment. 2 years after beginning his entrepreneurial adventure, Jerry heard that Jerk and Son went out of business. Jerry said that he never intended to harm Jerk and Son when he accepted general contractor's offer. He said that looking back on things, he realized that he'd become Jerk's greatest nightmare. I can't say that general contractor intended no harm. I thought the most amazing thing about the story was how that Jerry maintained his self-esteem in spite of all the ridicule. I also gained a respect for Jerry's father, who instilled an unshakable self-confidence in Jerry. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.